Hello, and thank you for joining us for our latest episode of the Irish Angle on Jump to It. This week we're going to have a look back at the Irish Derby weekend and some of the fallout from that, and some of the other issues in racing over the last 7 days. I'm joined this week by Emma Nagle and Johnny Ward. And first of all, I'd like to welcome you both here. And Johnny, I'd like to ask you around the Derby is one of the main things as you were there on Derby weekend. But first of all, Emma, what did you make of the Derby? I know you weren't there, but you did watch it all. And what did you think of the weekend?
Yeah, I thought the Derby, it was a brilliant spectacle, great race. It was actually better than I was expecting it to be. Westover really, he kind of announced himself as a superstar on the scene, which, to be honest, it surprised me. I didn't actually rate him that highly going into the race, but God, he really blew them away. Derby weekend as a whole, I've heard nothing but positive feedback, to be honest. Like the Curragh gets a massive slating, I think, by myself included as well sometimes, but I think they put on a good show. Everyone who kind of seemed to go seemed to enjoy it. The crowds were good. I mean, considering it's a 13,000 capacity, I think they had 11 or 12, like, which wasn't too bad. But no, I wasn't there myself. Like, atmosphere was supposed to be good from what I've heard, but I suppose Johnny might know a bit more about that than me.
Over to you, Johnny. What did you make of it? You were there Derby Day.
I had a great day, Vinny. To be honest, like the Irish Derby has definitely fallen on hard times, and we had kind of this apparent insistence from Coolmore that the race stayed there even when the Curragh was being redeveloped, and then you had the pandemic thrown in. So the Curragh has been like totally dilapidated for a long time, and the new Curragh now, it's basically Ireland's only proper modern racetrack. When you go in, it looks modern. It looks like something from the year 2022. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people will go racing. And I was actually fearful for the crowd at the Curragh. The official figure, now some of the figures that the Curragh have been given this year, I'm not certain of myself, because the figures around the Guineas, they certainly were conveniently round numbered, and there were poor attendances at the Guineas. So we go with the figure they gave, which was something like 11,500. But the atmosphere was really good there, Vinny. It was like it didn't feel like it was. It didn't feel quiet. It felt busy without being over busy. There was a queue for the food and drink, but it wasn't too bad. And I have to say, I just really enjoyed meeting people. Everyone I spoke to, pretty much everyone I spoke to, was having a good day. To watch the racing there, and the ease of access from the parade ring to the stand is really, really good. I think you can watch the sport very, very close to you. They're not a million miles from you. It's all very convenient. You can see the horses cantering down the start right in front of you. Maybe these are old values that we take for granted now, but inside there was a very good buzz. And in general, it was a really good day. It wasn't a bad day weather-wise, which I think needs reiterating. I mean, if it had been a horrible day, and we will have bad days in the Derby, weather-wise, what'll it be like? But I think it was a decent crowd. And as I was saying to Brian Kavanagh afterwards, the Curragh really has to kick on from this now, because this shouldn't be deemed a success either. We need to have more than 11,500 at our Premier Day, considering all the money that was spent in the place.
Yeah, well, this is where it comes back to for me. I've been a critic of the redevelopment. The main thing being, besides the cost of it, which is obviously a big factor because there was a huge overrun in the development, but that they built a stand that only holds 6,000 people. That's the first thing. And I really struggle with that, to try and find, like we talk about, you say you talked to Brian Kavanagh about bringing this forward. And yes, I hope they do. And the same with the Champions Weekend, that could be something that grows as years go by. We've also got the Irish Cesarewitch this year with a huge prize fund, which makes it one of the main staying races in Europe, if not the world, this year. So that could end up being a huge race in years to come. So what do? Do we build a second stand? Is that what's needed at the Curragh to cater for this crowd going forward?
See, like Brian Kavanagh, when in the Irish Times did a piece, Brian Kavanagh afterwards, Brian O'Connor, and he said the stand was built for a capacity of 12 to 13,000. Now the stand didn't feel crammed on the day, Vinny. It was busy, but you could move around easily. So I don't genuinely know what the figure is, but I presume it's closer to 12 or 13,000, and then you can stretch people out in the other areas, because, as you say, if it is 6,000, I mean, there's something badly wrong. You probably remember the days when they were in on the infield, and like they do that at English racetracks. So I don't know where that's going to go, but I think the stand might have a capacity for greater than that.
Yeah, I don't think it does. So officially, in the official beginning, when they opened it, first off, it was 6,000, and there's room for maybe somewhere around 8,000 in the outfield, which is
Mm.
all the surrounding area. Now, okay, we know there's an infield, which they did use years ago with the Budweiser green and those sort of things. I'm not quite sure what the legality of that is, because they seem to be avoiding that at all costs. Even during the redevelopment phase, you would have thought they could have put proper marquees in the infield, and they didn't necessarily do that. So I'm not quite sure why they won't do that anymore. Maybe it's an issue with the defence forces who have the rights over that land. There could be issues around that, which I'm not sure of. But the other thing, a couple of other things, let me ask you these questions. One of them is the betting ring. The betting ring is not in front of the stand where it used to be. I thought it was in a perfect position there. They've moved it now up below the parade ring. Do you think that works? I think it's a bad move, personally.
Yeah, I don't get that thing necessarily. One thing that annoyed me about the Curragh with where they were was it was hard to watch the race at times because the bookies were right in front of you. So unless you went bang up to the back, which clearly not everyone could do on Derby Day, the bookies were badly obstructing the view of the races. That's my recollection of the Curragh anyway. And for me, like, the betting ring was fairly lively, Vinny, last weekend. There was a lot of people buzzing around. A lot of people chatting to the bookmakers. It was kind of like the old days. And it's literally a 10-second walk from where you're watching the race. So for me, it's not an issue. But I know a lot of people agree with you. A lot of the bookmakers agree with you. But for me, it's not an issue. And I think it's important that you can go to the stand and watch the horses run. And for me, that was one of the most enjoyable aspects of the day. Like, I watched the finish of the 2-year-old race that Chartash won right in front of me. And to see a finish like that it actually reminded me why I like going racing in the first place. And I'd prefer to be able to see Chartash than a load of bookies in front of me while I'm trying to watch finish.
Yeah, there's a point with that. Now, having said that, they could have moved them to a lower level. They could have had a dugout parade ring or betting ring in front of the stand. Something could have been done. I agree with you. The first 6, 7, 8 steps of the stand in previous times, you were obstructed by bookmakers, umbrellas, and everything else. There's an issue with that, but I think the bigger thing for me is the fact that the atmosphere that brought to the stand, that you could be in the stand in advance of a race and you're hearing the bookmaker shouting their odds and people running out of the stand to place a bet, running back up to watch the races. I always thought that was an integral part of the Curragh. It was one of the things that worked really well at the Curragh particularly. You also have Punchestown has a very similar situation with all the bookmakers in front of the stand that works extremely well there too. Just one of the things. The other one then for me is the wind, that it was a windy day, and particularly the public bar, which is on the first floor, that is very exposed, the outside area, which is where most of the people drink, is on the outside of that bar, all the tables set up. That can be a bit of a mess. It's kind of a wind tunnel, that end of the stand.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue. It was windy. Like, I spoke to Brendan Sheridan at the day of the races, and without going on about climate change, he said, like, the forecast for what he got was something like 15 mils of a difference in terms of what the Curragh got versus what he got in his house, which is literally a mile or two away. So another thing about the climate change in Ireland is that it's very, very windy much of the time now. Like, I cycle, and I'd say 90% of the time it's windy. So the Curragh is very open. If it's rainy and windy, that gets into the stand. And as you say, Vinny, it was windy. I mean, you could see some people were sort of not necessarily that comfortable outdoors. I saw a few pints being kind of spilt and being blown away. That is an issue, and that's definitely not going to go away.
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of people, that the plastic glasses with pints do get, even full pints are being knocked over by the wind in that area, that's definitely something to look at. I don't know whether they can simply cover it in because it's open on all 4 sides down that end. So they could, or three sides it's open. Yeah, they could definitely do something with that, I suppose, as a minor thing to deal with. But overall, you had a good day. Obviously, you must have backed a winner or two. You wouldn't be saying that.
I backed actually backed Chartash, and, like, obviously it was strong in Westover. The Chartash one was interesting to me because you go racing. This horse was 7-2 in the morning, and I backed him at 8 or 9-1. He went off. I think he even went off 9-1. But I'd literally given up on the bet. I was like, they don't win when they drift like this. Obviously, sometimes they do.
Yeah. And then we go back to some of the other issues over the weekend. The big one that's lingering from that weekend is the Pretty Polly on the Sunday, when Rosscarbery finished third in the Pretty Polly Stakes for Paddy Toomey. And obviously there's been an issue over the weight. She came in 5 pounds light, or more or less 5 pounds light, and was disqualified. What do you think of this, Emma?
It was a hard one, really, like, because it's not something I've ever heard of happening before. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, because so they're saying that he weighed in, and the clock of the scale told him to take out 5 pounds, and then he weighed out 5 pounds light. But I mean, that would take a double computer glitch to be correct. Like, so it's kind of hard not that it's hard to believe, but it's a very strange one, and it's like you'd feel sorry for the Connections because they supplemented the filly for 30,000 a few days before the race. She ran a massive race into third, albeit £5 light, but she ran a big race at a big price. And now they're down 30k. They would have won it back with the prize money. I don't know where it goes from here. Obviously, it's being appealed, but what can the HRB really do? I mean, she did won £5 light. They're calling it a computer glitch, but it's I don't know. It's very hard. You obviously feel for Paddy Toomey and the Connections. They're very vocal about they're upset with the issue, but I mean, I don't really know where it goes from here, to be honest.
Yeah, the big thing here really is that it's the notional value of the filly if she finished third in a Group 1. She's obviously worth a lot more. How do you assess that? I don't know. It's very difficult to know. Was she worth $500,000 going into the race? Is she worth 5 million coming out of it? I really don't know how you equate that. And then there's other relatives of her as well that would be at stud or going to stud, and obviously it affects their value too. Whether it be the sire or the dam and everything else, that they all have an increased value if she's Group 1 placed. The big issue here for me is that Paddy Toomey seems to be adamant that it was not necessarily a computer glitch, but that it was a glitch on the side of the IHRB. It was either the computer or it was their clerk of the scales. But the more I look into this, it seems unlikely it was the computer that caused the problem, because the same computer was used all weekend. There were hundreds of horses weighed out, weighed in, not a problem with any of them. Even in the race itself, every other horse in that race, when they weighed in, they all weighed in at the correct weight, the exact same as they had weighed out at, more or less within the space of a few ounces or whatever. So it's hard to see how you blame the equipment on it. That seems to be the one thing I can pretty fairly say wasn't the problem. So we're left with, then there's one other option, and it's human error, but it's which side is the human error on? Was it the clerk of the scales? Did he make a mistake, or did Wayne Lorden, Paddy Toomey and the Connections make a mistake in some way when they saddled the horse? I really don't know the answer, but the thing is, I don't think anyone's ever going to know the answer here. How can you know that? I presume what's going to happen is each side is going to blame the other, and we're left with a stalemate. The one thing I don't think can happen is, I don't think there's any chance that the filly can be reinstated, because, as you said, Emma, she ran with £5 less than she was supposed to. So if they reinstate her, you've got a problem for all the ones behind. They're all going to have a claim on the fact that they should be finishing third in third, fourth, and fifth, or wherever they should finish in a Group 1, and they're not getting that position. So there's going to be legal challenges if she gets reinstated. I don't think that's an option. So then the question is, what happens? That if Paddy Toomey and his Connections don't get some recompense on the day of the referral or the appeal, they look like they're going to take legal action. At least he's indicated that they'll probably do that. I'm not quite sure where that ends up. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit like Emma. I've no prior history of anything like this, and I'm totally out of my depth, other than to advise people to read your blog, Vinny, on the issue, if only for the most unusual deviation of content towards hair transplants in Turkey that came in at the end of it. But I think first, which I think is well worth reading, and you hit on a point, if you haven't read the blog, you hit on a point that a lot of people say to me very regularly about being overheard on the phone, but you do explain it very well. And I suppose this wasn't a glitch, because, as you say, I mean, all day, every day, this has been fine, and the weighing-in procedure has been fine, and I don't think anyone really believes that there's actually a glitch here. And if Paddy Toomey wants to take the civil case, that's fine. The owner, who has transferred the likes of Rosscarbery and a couple of other horses to Paddy Toomey this year, regardless of what happens here, is having an incredibly good time with it. The switch has worked very well, and I think it strikes at a broader issue here, which is just how anachronistic the whole black tie thing is, because I think it's a nonsense at this stage. I mean, I presume everyone at the sales has ready access on his or her phone to, the relatives of horses, and, black type is completely out of date, I think. I mean, this should have no effect whatsoever on the value of Rosscarbery or her siblings, because it makes no difference really in terms of what she's achieved in terms of her career. And horses should be judged on the best rating that they achieved whilst racing, not black type, because, as we all know, it's anomalous. And I think at this stage it's so out of date that people should even be pursuing black type, and it should be all ratings based. But on the issue itself, I'd advise people to read your blog. I think you explain it quite well. It's not as straightforward as it seems. But for me, as I say, I can't see how she gets reinstated.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that issue of the black type. I've been on about that for a while as well. I think that if you want to stick with Group Ones for argument's sake, there's about 12 tiers of Group Ones, isn't there? That
Mm.
you've got. We're going to talk later on maybe about Alpinista winning in France at the weekend, and she'd previously won in Berlin, Cologne, and Munich, all Group Ones, but they're not quite the champion stakes at Newmarket or Ascot or whatever it is. They're not the pinnacle of these races at Group
And
One
Vinny as
level.
well, like you're thinking of a day when, like, I love newspapers, but sadly print is kind of a dying thing. And these were the days where everyone at the racetrack relied on that book in front of them to go through and scan the relatives and all that. Everyone's on their phone now.
That's true. Yeah. Moving on, just talking about the value of horses and everything else. Emma, did you see the Derby sale that was held last week as well? There were some astonishing figures there. 18 million spent over 2 days. Is that money well spent, in your opinion?
I was surprised, to be honest. Given like the current climate, everyone's banging on about the cost of living crisis. Like, it's to see the amount of money that was spent. I suppose the people spending it are probably living in a bit of a different world to everyone else, but still, I mean, some of the figures, like I think there was that over 300,000 for a filly. I mean, a 3-year-old filly. Like, obviously she's well bred. We're like, if she breaks her leg in the morning, you're down 300,000. You know what I mean? She hasn't proven to done anything. She's related to, I think, if the Mighty Potter. He was a good horse last year, but some of the money, like there was 6 lots for over 200,000. I can't wrap my head around it. Like, it's, I think 3 point-to-point vendors spent 3.5 million between them, or something similar to that. It's crazy money. I mean, obviously it's an investment, but it's a very, very risky investment, like in the current climate. Um, like you have to make you have to make a profit back on those horses. Like, it costs a lot of money to train the horses for a year, to keep them going. It's obviously a massive risk. Like, horses, I mean, anything could happen to them. They might be no good, no matter how well bred they are. Yeah, I don't know. I was surprised by the figures in the current climate. Like, it's massive risk, but I suppose that's the game as well, isn't it?
Yeah. The other thing here is there was a 93% clearance rate. So, like, anyone that threw
Yeah.
a horse in there got it sold, more or less. And as you say, these people have a couple of years to wait to see that they get a return on their investment. And in the current climate, that has to be a bit shaky, doesn't it?
Oh, I mean,
Just
it's
looking,
crazy.
yeah, the average price paid was 58k. If you go back to 2015, that was 43k was the average at the same sale. So it's a 30% increase in 7 years. There's very little else has gone up 30% in that time as such. And then these people are expecting that money to go up again in the next 2 years. Fair dues to them. That's all I can say. I think they might have been
Yeah,
better off with Bitcoin. Yeah,
it's a brave game. Like,
yeah,
I think walking the park is obviously a very good sire, but like he's still probably living off Duvan a small bit, isn't he? Like, I mean, he's had a few good horses, but he hasn't had anything spectacular. And I was just looking through, I think 10 horses by walk in the park made over 100,000. Like, I mean, Jesus, they can't all be that good, like, you know. I think
no.
his average price for the sale was over 90,000. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy for a 3-year-old horse who's done nothing, and you're bones of 100,000, like a house for some people, and he's just walking out of the yard there. I couldn't wrap my head around it, to be honest.
Yeah, I find it difficult too. Just we're going to talk about some of the other things that happened over the last weekend. The Lancashire Oaks was won in Haydock on Saturday, where there's a, a bit of a difference of opinion here with a lot of people on what actually happened in this. You had a horse called Free Wind, ridden by Rab Havlin, won the race, but when she was coming through for its run on the inside, it was hampered, and there was a skirmish with a horse called Ashada, ridden by Jim Crowley. The two of them were bumping off each other for several hundred yards before Rab Havlin eventually pulls his one back out, switches around, and wins the race, which was fine. The stewards took the opinion that Rab Havlin was the culprit in this, and he got a 5-day suspension for careless riding. And most people who've watched this back seem to be of the opinion that Jim Crowley had some hand actor part in it, and probably should have been the one that was suspended because he moved off a straight line and closed the gap. What did you think of this one, Johnny?
Yeah, just on very briefly on the Derby sale prices, like it is insane, Vinny, because if you look at the prices of horses on the flat, like that's such a kind of a complex market because of like Hong Kong and the money that you can get from Arabia, Hong Kong, and we'll say Australia. But like jumps racing at the moment is such a confined space, and British jumps racing is all over the shop. So it's a completely crazy market. Not to mind, I'm involved in a horse who last month's training fees with add-ons and the cost of going to the races was nearly $3,000, and the horse is competing for $6,000 races here. Everything is at the price of fuel. Everything's insane. Yet you have the point-to-point people who would have spent maybe $10,000 now spending 50 on store horses, be it by walking the park or probably not by walking the park. Obviously, it's mad. Just on the Haviland thing, like I think the head on is really fascinating to watch. I'm watching the Tour de France the last few days, and they've a bizarre insistence in the end of the Tour de France to have head-ons for the end of the races. So they should have drone footage, I'd imagine, because it's very hard to know who wins. If you have a photo, you'd never look at a horse race head-on. But you can see when they sprint in the Tour de France just how basically they throw everything out the window. I mean, safety is neither here nor there, and it's recklessly fast racing, 70 kilometers an hour, shoulders against shoulders. If they crash, God knows what will happen. Like, it's really, really dangerous. And maybe there's an element of that in horse racing, because like, why does Jim Crowley do what he why did he do what he did in that maneuver? Haviland comes up the rail. I think as a jockey, I'm not a jockey, but like Emmett have a better idea. If you come up a gap like that, you'll probably think there's a fair chance it'll close because of the competitive nature. But who was behaving dangerously here, Vinny? Was it Crowley edging in left when he clearly tried to close the gap, or was it Haviland for going for the gap in the first place? And I think British racing, we've had issues with Jordan of late in terms of the one key thing, which is dangerous riding, and I think the endangering the human on the horse is the most paramount importance. And for Haviland to end up with the ban here, for me, I was pretty gobsmacked, to be honest.
Yeah, what did you think of it, Emma?
Yeah, I'm the same as Johnny. I couldn't believe that Rab actually got the ban. I saw a tweet about it. I actually thought it was a joke when I read it first. Like, he was halfway up the gap. He can't close it, then it's too late. Like, it's something you see a lot in national hunt racing, people closing a gap and a bit of a bump and a push. But like, I find it very hard to watch on the flat because they're going at such a pace, and it's just so dangerous when that kind of thing happens. I mean, the filly was very lucky to even stay on her feet. It could have been a massive accident. Like, if she had gone down, they're just going at such a high pace. I thought it was really stupid riding by Jim Crowley, really dangerous. I honestly can't wrap my head around the decision by the stewards. The gap was there. You look at the head on, the gap was there. If he wanted to close it, he had to do it earlier. He was already halfway up there when he closed it off, and it was just really reckless and dangerous. And oh no, I can't wrap my head around the decision, to be honest. I haven't really seen anyone who agreed with it either. So.
Like,
Yeah,
Emma called it really stupid riding, Vinny, right? So you marry that with what Hannigan did in the Norfolk. Like, when you ride stupidly like that, it's one thing like saying something stupid. It's another thing when you're going 40 kilometers, 40 miles an hour, or whatever you're going in a race. And at the top level races, it's very, very fast. And to do that is so dangerous. It's so dangerous. And I think at this stage we have to agree the bans and the enforcements, clearly in this case, because Crowley wasn't even the guilty party, so on and so forth, it's not meeting the punishment and the dangers involved.
Yeah. The other thing here is just talking about how dangerous this whole thing is. We've a girl in Australia last week. She wouldn't be the first. She won't be the last. Who took a very bad fall in a race. A girl called Leah Kilner. Her horse collapsed under it, so it had nothing to do with interference. But she hit the ground head first, and they're fearing for her life there for the last few days. There's better news this morning. Some positive news that she was briefly taken out of a coma, and she was able to hold her mum's hand and squeeze her mum's hand, which is a great sign. And please God, she'll be okay. But it does show how dangerous this is, particularly flat racing, because of the speed they're going at. What do you think, Emma? Do the rules need to be changed?
100%. Oh, definitely. And I think Kevin Blake's a big advocate for this. I mean, maybe you get away with it a bit more in jumps racing. They're not going as fast. You can get a bit of a bump and a push, and it's not going to be monumental damage more than likely. But in flat racing, like, I don't see any need for any interference to be allowed. I think they should just treat it like they do out in Hong Kong, out in America. Common sense, I think, is necessary. I mean, you can have a tiny bump that doesn't affect things, but things like that are very dangerous. They should just. I mean, Jim Crowley, he was obviously riding to the rules, which is proven in the stewards' inquiry. So you can't really blame him too much, because those are the rules, and he did abide by them technically. But I think the rules definitely need to change, because it's a very dangerous game in flat racing, allowing pushing and barging. Someone's going to get seriously injured by it before they change it if they don't have a sit down about it soon, I think, because there's been a few incidents in the last few months, the last few weeks.
There's
And
nothing to suggest, and none of us think any differently. And that Jim Crowley and Paul Hannigan are nice, good, sound people, good people, like
yeah,
good people for racing. Yet they obviously think the rules are such that they can behave like this and get away with it.
yeah,
But the rules are as such. That's the whole point, isn't it? That they can and they do, and that's the way it works. The other thing for me is that this drives me mad all the time, is the fact that you take in races that with jockeys breaking rules. They break rules every day with the whip, for instance. So you take a race, say it be an Irish Derby or it be a champion hurdle, it doesn't matter what it is, but you get two horses going to the finishing line, and from my point of view, I've backed one and the other guy breaks the rules and beats the horse many more times than the rules allow, keeps the race. I lose my money, he keeps the race, and the connections of my horse lose the money as well, and all the rest of it. And yet someone has broken rules. Like that for me drives me mad every time I see it. Saying, why should a guy get a 10-day suspension here or whatever? As you talk about the Paul Hannigan thing as well. Why can someone get a large suspension for breaking the rules and yet still keep the race? That should be the first thing that happens. The way the old French rules were, that if you interfere with horses or you break the rules, you get thrown out. And that used to be the case, not anymore. The French have actually switched it back now to the UK style rules, which are the same, similar to the ones in Ireland as well. So it favours the transgressor all the time, which is why the jockeys break the rules, because there's an advantage to breaking the rules. That's my view on it anyway, for what it's worth.
100%.
yeah,
Right, one
definitely. I
last
mean,
thing
there's no massive disincentive.
No, there's not. Yeah. One last thing we were going to have a quick talk about was, well, this is just something that I had a look at yesterday, was in Saint-Cloud, the big race in Saint-Cloud. You had Hurricane Lane, son of Frankel, owned by Godolphin, trained by Charlie Appleby. Back in training, ran in Royal Ascot behind Broome, ran very disappointingly that day, was odds on. Starts odds on again in a Group 1 in France yesterday and runs deplorably badly again, beaten 11.5 lengths, I think it was. Never at the races. You'd wonder, is that a colt that should have been retired at 3? You'd imagine his value has gone way down. Like, he was an Irish Derby winner, St. Leger winner, third in an arc. You can see why you want to bring the horse back, perhaps, because as we note with those the Derby distance horses and those Leger distance horses, they probably don't have the value at stud. They end up being National Hunt sires when they go eventually. But at the same time, his value must have plummeted over the last 2 months or so. And then the same race, you have Alpinista wins it, which is trained by Mark Prescott, owned by Kirsten Rowling. 5-year-old mare. She's now after winning 4 Group 1s in a row. She won at Berlin, Cologne, Munich, and now Saint-Cloud. So a very unusual route they've taken there to win 4 Group 1s in a row. What do you think of this, Emma? Should Hurricane Lane be one that they should have put out to pasture before now?
Like you said, he's an Irish national winner. He's a St. Leger winner. Do Godolphin want a national hunt sire? No. So I think they were always going to keep him going. To be honest, I'd be a big advocate for keeping horses racing. I don't like seeing horses retire at 3. It makes it very hard to kind of pull people into the flat, because you're losing your stars. Like, you'd be losing Hurricane Lane was a pretty big name last year, and he retired to stud, and that'd be it. You wouldn't hear any more of him. But no, he could. I mean, he could turn it around. He's probably, yeah. His values obviously dropped massively, but like you said, like, he's probably a national hunt sire by trade at the moment with the races he won, and Godolphin don't want that. So I mean, I suppose they haven't lost much in it in keeping him going. He was a horse I liked last year. He's a tough horse. I'd like to see him turn around, but yeah, no, he ran poorly yesterday. Like you mentioned, the winner, Alpinista, like, it's a massive placement by Mark Prescott to get her into all those it's a very alternative route, but I mean, she's probably a fairly valuable filly now. Maybe she wouldn't have achieved the same heights if she stayed and kind of did the more conventional style. So no, that was it's a good story, definitely a good story.
Yeah, Mark Prescott now is a very smart man when it comes to training horses. He doesn't have to make a living out of it. Particularly the stepping them up and trip is the key to most of his. So be interesting to see if she goes for the arc. What do you think, Johnny? Did you see that race yesterday?
I didn't see the race. It was actually I was in Crow Park, so I'm kind of trying to just get my bearings back after the hurling or whatever. I think, in fairness, Vinny, the Curragh Eclipse was a terrific race on Saturday. Really, really enjoyable. But issues with the crowd, which we'll probably get to in future weeks. So I missed the race at St. Cloud, but the two horses you mentioned, both by Frankel, and I think like Hurricane Lane would have been a reasonably valuable stallion. And in fairness, I don't know what's gone wrong this year. His first run back wasn't bad, so maybe something, some excuse will come to mind. But Alpinisa reminds me a bit of State Arrest, the way that she's been campaigned to win all those Group 1s in all those different countries. Brilliant, brilliant training performance. And it'll be interesting to see like how Frankel's career at Stud develops, because I think the post-Galileo world will be fascinating. I think it might be a little bit more interesting as well. And will Frankel produce not only superstars, but will he produce stallions as well? And Alpinisa will definitely be sought after in terms of what stallion she goes to afterwards. And we'll see how Westover gets on in the arc. I think he might go down that route. He's an 8-1 chance, which looks a fair bet. If he goes down that route, he's another very exciting son of Frankel. But Frankel does look the way to go in the future in terms of Galileo's replacement, and it's not going to be something Aidan O'Brien's going to benefit from, I would imagine.
No, that's the thing. Does he have any Frankels? Very few, I'd imagine. They're all still the Galileo outcross and that, and he's got a few Montjews and the rest of it. I don't think he's too many Galileos in his armory at this stage. But then again, Aidan O'Brien and Coolmore, they're some powerful outfit, and no doubt they'll come up with whatever it takes to take on Godolphin and whoever else in the years to come. Emma, what would you think of that? Frankel, is he going to be the sire of sires?
I mean, it's looking like it at the moment, isn't it? He's probably like, it's going to be hard. I don't think anyone will ever emulate Galileo, but he's making a fair go of it so far. I saw Frankel's 14 there on Facebook the other day. That made me feel old. Like, he doesn't seem that long ago when he was around, like, does it? But no, he's having a good go of it. Like, he's producing tough horses. Westover could do big things in the arc. I think he really impressed me. That'd be a massive winner from him as a sire. Whether he'll sire sires, it's something we're yet to see. I suppose we'll have to wait for that one. But no, I'm a massive fan of Frankel, definitely, yeah, as a sire.
All right, guys. Well, look, thanks for having a chat with me this week about all the little issues around the place, and we're planning to do this every week on a Monday. So hopefully, anyone who's watched, if you can tune in again next week, we'll be here, same three of us, same time, and we'll go through it all again. Hopefully, with plenty more chat and comment on all the different issues in the sport. And that's it for now. And thanks again for watching, and bye for now.